Hello everyone, happy Friday. Thank you guys for joining me on this lovely Friday. It's Dan, it's your favorite realtor here, Daniel Gonzalez. I wanted to jump into a topic today that is very, very important for our soon-to-be investors or already investors that aren't aware. What's that topic? It's a 1031 exchange, of course. For those who don't know about the 1031 exchange, you are missing out. This is a great opportunity to really double the amount of your investments, right? That being said, let's dive straight into it. What is a 1031 exchange? Well, to simplify it, you would say that it is a process that allows you to defer the payment of capital gains taxes, right? So when you go to sell a property, you typically will have to pay capital gains taxes, especially if it's investment property. When you have to pay those taxes, Uncle Sam takes a cut of what is a portion of your sale. Now, instead of having to pay whatever that amount is in capital gains, we will do what is called that 1031 process, where you essentially partner up with Uncle Sam, and Uncle Sam tells you, hey, you know what, don't worry about the capital gains taxes. Keep that, as long as you are taking those funds and rolling that into another like-kind or similar property. The term is like-kind property, right? Rolling that investment funds that you sold, liquidating that and rolling that into another like-kind property. You'll keep those funds, don't worry about paying me those capital gains taxes. We can defer the payment of those taxes, right? So that is a great way to turn, let's say, whatever the sale is. If you had to pay, if you sold your home for $480,000, the investment property, let's say you had to pay capital gains tax of $80,000, right? Then now you're down at $400,000. You're limited to use $400,000. Instead of having to go about that process, you can partner up with Uncle Sam, keep the $480K, and use all of that $480K to buy the next investment property or like-kind property, right? So there's many ways to go about this. Disclaimer too, guys, and I should have said this at the beginning, I am not a 1031 certified intermediary, right? Like, you want to go straight to the source when it comes to planning out this 1031 tax exchange. Now, I do have the connections that I'd be more than happy to give to you guys and help you guys get together with. That being said, please understand that this is all general information. It's always best to talk to an expert in that specific subject of the 1031 exchange and things like that. Now, that said, just to give you the gravity of importance or opportunity that you may be losing out on, imagine you have an investment property that is now, you've held it for a couple of years, you bought it at $500K, it now goes up to $1 million, right? So you go the next, after you find out that it's worth $1 million, you go and sell it, and given that you have to pay capital gains taxes, if the capital gains tax is 35% of what you are going to keep out of that $1 million, that is a total of $350,000 that you have to pay back to the IRS, right? Instead of keeping that in your pocket and being able to use those funds, right? Regardless, you have to pay taxes one way somehow, right? But the main thing is that you having to pay that $350, you only keep $650 now, right? Minus all the other things that come with closing on a property. So you really only get to use that $650 to purchase another investment property or like-kind property, right? Now, if you do the 1031 exchange, you get to keep those three. The IRS tells you, you know what, hold on to those $350 to keep it at $1 million and go and purchase the next investment and roll it into the next investment opportunity or like-kind property, right? Doing that, you've now turned, $650 into triple that or double that. I mean, really, you bought it at $500,000. It's at $1 million. You could go and roll that into some more investment opportunities, and you could turn that at $1 million indefinitely, right? I mean, for the investment career, you're able to hold on and keep postponing using the 1031, keep deferring the payment of taxes, as long as you follow accordingly to the IRS tax codes and things like that. So we have a question?
Yes.
Yes. Question.
Can you do that new property that you just bought now, invested for $1 million, you get a new one, when you sold that one, let's say a couple of years now, for $2 million? Like, can you keep doing a 1031 exchange forever?
Yeah, essentially you can keep doing a 1031 indefinitely. Now, like I said, double check everything with your tax advisors and your 1031 expert, but essentially, yes, you can continue to do the 1031 as many times as you like.
And when you eventually want to cash out of all your investment properties, does that tax keeps rolling over? How is that calculated at the very end when you're ready to retire?
That's a great question, because essentially when you defer that payment of those taxes, eventually you will have to pay those taxes once you do, let's say, turn that 1 million into 10 million, right, through the 1031, utilizing the 1031. It would depend as to how much you'll have to pay in taxes, but at the end of the day, you will have to pay taxes one way or another, unless you there's ways where one can create some type of trust. There's a process to where someone can essentially evade that payment of capital gains taxes if you structure things correctly. Now, I'm not going to get into detail with that, but yes, there is a way to turn that 1 million into 10 million, and then if you set things up properly, you could essentially keep that 10 million and leave it for your family, or leave it for whatever the case may be, right? But that is a long-term play that you really want to sit down with the professionals and get the information for, right?
Thank you.
And sooner rather than later, absolutely. That being said, what are the key things that you need to utilize the 1031 exchange? First and foremost, sit down with the expert and make sure your agent is aware of how the situation is going to process out, and getting that ball rolling with a qualified intermediary, right? So that's what you essentially would call the 1031 company. They are qualified intermediaries, a QI. And then from there, you want to essentially be already looking at like-kind property. You don't necessarily go on tour or however the case may be, but you want to keep an eye out for things and just start looking as an investor. Because there is a timeline that you have to follow, right? And they're very strict on that timeline. It cannot go a day over or minutes over. So once you do have a property that you're going to go ahead and do the 1031 exchange with your investment property that you're selling, you have to make sure that once you sell on the original property, on that day of selling that property, you have 45 days to go ahead and identify the new investment property that you're going to roll the funds into, right? Then from the day you close, you also have a total of 180 days after closing, right? So just double checking that, reiterating that. 45 days to identify, and then 180 days to close on that property. So once you close, the clock is ticking on the original property. Once you sell that first original property, you have 45 days to identify and 180 to close on the new property. And now keep in mind, like kind is a very vague wording that they like to use in the real estate industry, because as long as you can go from like a single family dwelling to land or vice versa, it really it gets down into the weeds when you start trying to figure out what exactly is the utilization for each one of those. But ultimately, from what I've heard, one can actually use like-kind property for anything. I mean, from single family to land to single family, right? As long as it's being used as an investment. Like-kind property is a very broad term. At the end of the day, though, double check with your qualified intermediary. That being said, that's the general basis of what you need to understand about the 1031. Of course, there's a rabbit hole we could go into, and to keep things short and sweet, we won't go into that rabbit hole. But if you'd love to go into that rabbit hole, and I'd love to go in there with you, we can definitely set up a consultation and talk about all the amazing questions that you guys may be having about the 1031 exchange. And that being said, the final thing I did want to leave you guys as well is to keep in mind, if it made sense, right? Air quotes, made sense. It's very important. One can actually use their primary residence for a 1031 exchange. Bet you didn't know that one, huh? Now, that's a long-term play and things you have to plan out. Like everything in real estate, these things take planning. So please don't forget that we're here to help you every step of the way and to light the path to and through all your real estate transactions in the real estate world. Thank you guys for your time today. I don't know if we have any other questions there for the live.
We don't.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you guys have a good day today. Thank you guys for stopping by, and may you guys have a blessed Friday.
Thank you. Woo.